Let me know if this sounds like you. You've read a book like Inner Workout or listened to a podcast and you got really excited. You got access to all of these tools and then you struggled to use the tools in your life. Maybe you designed an evening routine for yourself. You know that scrolling before bed doesn't do you any favors, and so you said that you're gonna read instead. But for some reason, you still find yourself scrolling. And you're trying to understand this disconnect between your desires and your actions. When you start looking for advice, all it pretty much says is mind over matter, just get some more willpower and some self-control. And my guess is that if you're watching this video, that advice doesn't fully resonate. So let's talk about it. In this video, we're gonna explore the definitions of willpower and self-control, what's happening when your desires and your actions don't align, and 5 self-regulation strategies to boost your self-care. At Inner Workout, we love definitions, so let's start by defining willpower. We're going to use a definition from the American Psychological Association. They say that willpower is the ability to resist short-term temptations in order to meet long-term goals. And when you think more deeply about willpower, it's easy to get into circular logic. Think about it. You're not making the choices that you want to make, so you look for advice, and then the advice is basically to make more thoughtful choices, to make the choices you want to make. And it's kind of like, okay, I get that, that's why I'm here, but how do I do that? And that's where self-control can enter the chat. In her research, Dr. Marina Milyevskaya defines self-control as the process or behavior of overcoming a temptation or prepotent response in favor of a competing goal. I really like this definition because the word self-control can feel a little controlling, and the way that Marina puts it really distills self-control down to choice. When we're exercising self-control, we're choosing the option that's best for us, whether that's not looking at your phone first thing in the morning or opting out of a scroll and shame spiral. So choosing yourself is the ideal, but if you're watching this video, it's probably because you're having trouble doing that. So let's talk about what's happening beneath the surface and get into some of the science of self-control. Maybe you've heard people say that willpower is a finite resource. We only have so much of it in any given day. The jury's actually out on whether or not willpower is a finite resource, but science can't deny that it definitely feels depleting when we're using our willpower or our self-control. And you know what else can make us feel depleted? Being tempted. It takes a little something out of our metaphorical tank when we're even presented with temptation. This belief is based on research from Dr. Marina Milyevskaya, who we mentioned before, alongside Dr. Michael Inlicht. And that same study actually suggests that when we feel depleted because of being tempted, we're less likely to make the choice that we want to make. And that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? It's hard to choose to journal when you get a notification saying that your favorite creator just dropped a new video. And even if you ultimately do decide to journal, there's still a sense of willpower depletion from being tempted to watch that video in the first place. So what are we supposed to do with that information? I want to share 5 self-control strategies that in turn can help you improve your self-care. These strategies are inspired by the work of our friends Milyevskaya and Inlicht, and they're joined by Dr. Blair Saunders for this research. So the first strategy is situation selection. The idea behind situation selection is that you are creating a temptation-free environment. You don't have to worry about impulsive decision-making because past you already made the decision for current you. It's a really proactive approach. Let me share a couple of examples. So the Inner Workout app actually uses this strategy with our scheduled lock sessions. If you know that, for example, you don't want to scroll first thing in the morning or you want to make sure you have focused time at work, you can just ahead of time decide what apps you want to block. Maybe it's TikTok and Instagram and I don't know, Reddit. And instead of having to make that decision every day not to scroll, you've put something in place to select your situation, to make it temptation-free. Or say you've decided that you want to start your mornings with journaling, and what you find instead is that you keep looking at your phone and then getting pulled into your email inbox. What you could do is get an analog, old school alarm clock and keep your phone in another room. And instead of having your phone by your bedside, you have your journal and your pen. Now, if you really wanted to, you could get up and go to that other room and get your phone. But what you've done is you've selected that situation. You've made it so much easier for you to journal rather than go check your email inbox. So those are both examples of situation selection. Our second strategy is situation modification. Because we can't design temptation-free environments all of the time. I mean, you've got to leave the house at some point. The idea of situation modification is that you tweak your environment or sometimes leave the environment altogether so you can make the most aligned choices. Again, let's look at a couple examples. So maybe it's a Sunday afternoon, you've gone to a coffee shop to read and reflect, but your neighbors are really loud at the next table. They are also talking about kind of some juicy gossip, and it's hard not to eavesdrop. What would situation modification look like in this instance? Well, if you have noise-canceling headphones, you could put those on to block out the noise and get back to your reading and reflection. You might also decide, I'm just gonna go home and do my reading and reflecting there. Those are both ways to modify the situation. Let's look at another coffee shop example. Maybe it's not the next table that's distracting you, but you find yourself hopping around apps. What you might do is do a one-off lock session in the Inner Workout app to remove the distraction of the apps so you can focus on the reading and reflecting that you wanted to. Situation modification responds to the moment so you can make decisions that align to your ultimate goals. The third self-control strategy is attention deployment. It sounds kind of fancy. It's really like an academic way of saying distract yourself. When you're mid-tasks, these distractions through attention deployment help you stay in the moment and delay gratification. You could also use distractions to make decisions that align with your broader goals. Let's break that down with a couple of examples. Here's one from my childhood. I used to sometimes go running with my dad, and I would just get so bored going around the track over and over again. And so what my dad would do is distract me with math problems. I know. So the first lap, he might say, okay, how many cars can you see? And I would count the cars during that lap. And then on the next lap, he might ask me, okay, how many tires are there then? Or how many windows? Or how many mirrors? And I was so focused on trying to figure out that mental math that I kept running further than I would have run. My dad probably didn't know this terminology, but he was using attention deployment. In your life, you might be craving that dopamine rush. You know, when you open an app and you see like the notifications coming in, you might use attention deployment to distract yourself, to seek dopamine elsewhere. Or you might tell yourself, you know, I'm just gonna do one thing first. Maybe that one thing first is a little meditation or journaling session or part of a mini course in the Inner Workout app. The fourth self-control strategy is cognitive change. So those first two strategies we talked about were about changing the situation. This one is about changing your thinking. There are a few ways that you can do this. The first is to reconnect to the why behind your choice. You know it feels really good to scroll in bed at night, but you sleep better and feel better in the morning when you don't scroll before bed. And so you can remind yourself, hey, here's why I made this decision, because I want to feel good waking up in the morning. The second way that you can use cognitive change is to reframe underlying beliefs. So at Inner Workout, we use this cognitive behavioral therapy inspired model called CARE, and we have a guided journal to walk you through that in the app. But another thing that you might use is the catch it, check it, change it model, where you notice your thought, you check it to see if it's true, and then you change it to something that is more useful. And then the final tool that you can use for cognitive change is to revisit powerful questions. So I love to have questions in my back pocket that help me make aligned choices. It might be a question like, if my time were money, would I be proud of how I was spending it right now? Or you might try something like this one. How would an athlete or an attentive partner or an artist approach this situation? And then we have strategy number 5, response modulation. We didn't save the best for last here, at least in my opinion. Response modulation basically is the mind over matter, muscle through it type of approach. It's what we traditionally think of when we think of self-control and willpower. It definitely works, but it can be energetically expensive. And like we said before, even though the jury's still out on whether or not willpower is a limited resource, we do know that temptation can deplete us a little bit. So could you choose to ignore a notification while your friend is catching you up on some drama? Yeah, you could. But wouldn't it have been easier if you just muted notifications before you sat down to chat with her? I personally like to use this strategy more sparingly and lean on some of the other strategies that we talked about before. So there you have it, a little breakdown of willpower and self-control and how it relates to our self-care. Which strategy are you gonna try and implement in your life? Feel free to let us know in the comments. If you liked this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter, Self-Care Sundays, where we share out all of our resources. Take care.